Okay, greetings, friends. I wanted to just share some information about one of the wondrous philosophers named Paracelsus. Now, Paracelsus was also an alchemist. And the reason why I want to review this alchemist is because of what was revealed in Jacques Vallée's video about Passport to Magonia, where he actually mentioned that Paracelsus contacted these beings. He could actually summon them with a specific sound ritual and was able to talk to these beings that were in another dimension that you must be careful of doing. I believe it was the sylphs that he contacted. It was either the sylphs or the gentry, but I think it was the sylphs that Paracelsus was contacting just to get knowledge. And you got to be careful when you contact these beings, because if you are not of honor, I'm sure they will dispatch you or you'll get yourself in trouble. So he didn't leave any sort of ways to contact these beings, I think, or at least not to my knowledge. I haven't found the information yet because I'm curious about all of this. And of course, if I were to ever contact any of these beings, it would be for pure knowledge, and that's it. And then, whatever offerings you have to give them, whether it's some sort of exchange, it might not be material goods, but maybe in oaths or something of this nature. And so Paracelsus was very careful to acknowledge that these are powerful beings. They are much more powerful than you and I, of mind and spirit, and they can do things that we are not capable of yet until we get to a spiritual level of comprehension of where our position is with all of the other spiritual beings that are all around us that we've seemingly forgotten because of the way things are in the world, with all the wars and erasing all of the history, and just to keep us dumbed down and keep us working around as slaves so that other beings can harness our louche energy. Yeah, that's where we are right now. But if we can comprehend our reality and even contact some of these beings in a benevolent fashion without any sort of egoic gain or material gain from this, then perhaps we can comprehend our world a little more. So Paracelsus was one of those people. He was out for pure knowledge. He wanted to stand for truth, apparently, based on some of the things that I've read. So I'm going to read a little bit about Paracelsus today. So here we are. Now, this is on Britannica.com. And again, these types of websites, their definitions of alchemy are a pseudoscience, and they don't promote alchemy anymore because they don't want you to have pure knowledge. And this is unfortunate. So we need to bring the awareness of alchemy back into the minds of the masses so that we can comprehend our world and also know the foundations of the reality and also the ways to solve any problem based on the alchemical four elements and more. So with that knowledge, we could literally solve any problem, but we haven't yet gained those eyes to see of what our world consists of. We think it's chaotic and we can't comprehend it, but if we grab these roots again, then we can return and restore that lost knowledge. So here we go. Paracelsus was a German Swiss physician. He was basically an alchemist, and they don't want to promote that. They want to put him in the realm of all the other physicians and also the medicinal practices of old. But he was actually against a lot of what was coming out at the time. And I believe this is what has landed us with all the pharmakia and things of this nature that are now people. I believe that this is where it sort of began. So he was born in November 11th or December the 17th, 1493. Now, I don't know why they don't know this. Perhaps they don't want people to know. I don't know. Anyway, he was born in Switzerland, died in 1541 in Salzburg. And he was an alchemist, again, who established the role of chemistry in medicine. He published a book. It was a great surgery book in 1536 and a clinical description of syphilis in 1530. Paracelsus was known as Theophrastus when he was a boy, the only son of an impoverished German doctor and chemist. His mother died when he was young, and shortly thereafter his father moved to Villach in southern Austria. There, Paracelsus attended the Bergschule, founded by the wealthy Fugger family of merchant bankers of Augsburg, where his father taught chemical theory and practice. Youngsters were trained at the Bergschule as overseers and analysts for mining operations in gold, tin, and mercury, as well as in iron, aluminum, and copper sulfate ores. This is what they did back then. They were really studying the base metals and other alchemical means and processes in order to comprehend our world. So they were finding all kinds of things. The young Paracelsus learned of metals that grow in the earth, watched the transformations of metallic constituents in smelting vats, and perhaps wondered about the transmutation of lead into gold. Now, that transmutation that's mostly spoken of is about the spirit. It's about transmuting your base materials of prima materia into that of gold. So you take the lead and you turn it into gold, lead it being the base mind, something that is not polished, something that is very basic, and lead is poisonous. But if you transmute it into gold, then you polish it to a shine, to a sheen. And gold is also attributed to the sun, while lead is Saturn, because Saturn is the black sun. So this is where this is going. It's more about a spiritual transformation. You want to become more virtuous. You want to look at all of your traits of darkness or traits that don't benefit you, and you want to polish them to a gleaming gold. That's what the great work is all about. So this is a conversion that's believed to be possible by alchemists of the time. Those experiences gave Paracelsus insight into metallurgy and chemistry, which likely laid the foundations of his later remarkable discoveries in the field of chemotherapy. Now, chemotherapy as it is today is not a good thing. I don't know what the past processes involved, but the things that they use today are in the body that the body cannot recover from, and many people from the therapy of chemotherapy. I just have to expand upon the notions of the things that I find across the internet, because I just went and looked for the chemotherapy history to see if there was any mention of Paracelsus. And of course, when you just do a general search in your web browser, you won't find anything but modern times, because they want to erase the past. Again, this is why it's very important for us to hold on to the past and all the ideas that were presented there, because there's nothing new under the sun. And here we go, where they are rewriting history and saying that chemotherapy was first coined as a word by Paul Ehrlich, a chemist who was well known in the early 1900s. And this is just another fallacy. I mean, perhaps in German, chemotherapy was called something else, but basically what they're saying is it's chemical therapy. This is where chemo comes from. And he defined it as using chemicals to treat syphilis. So he's trying to say that he is the purveyor of this knowledge. All they did was go and expand upon what's been done before. And you can do this on your own and then claim it as some modern discovery when it's not. So Paracelsus was in the 1500s, and he was using these treatments to treat syphilis as well. So that's why I'm saying, there's nothing new under the sun. And if we just go backwards in time, we'll know the history before it's even written again, because it just gets erased for each age, apparently, and then we just regurgitate the same things. So then it goes into when was it used and developed to treat, modern day problems such as cancer, which why would we label this dis-ease as a constellation, a known constellation called Cancer? It's very interesting, that we have this word and that word. And why are we using these terms? So there's an Egyptian papyrus that actually talks about using topical chemicals, herbs, extracts of herb, and so forth. So you can go as far back as you want, but it really was not until around mid-1930s that people began to think you can realistically use chemicals for cancer. This is just more of the regurgitation of, hey, we've discovered this. And all they do is they create a new disease and then go back to the foundations of how to treat it. And then they pretend to be magical, amazing doctors with new knowledge, and it's not new knowledge. This is all old knowledge, and that's where we need to go back to the foundations and know everything all at once. In 1507, Paracelsus joined the many wandering youths who traveled throughout Europe in the late Middle Ages, seeking famous teachers at one university after another. Paracelsus is said to have attended the University of Basel, Tübingen, Vienna, Wittenberg, Leipzig, Heidelberg, and Cologne during the next 5 years, but was disappointed with them all. He later wrote that he wondered how the high colleges managed to produce so many high asses, a typical Paracelsian jibe. Paracelsus upset the traditional attitudes of schoolmen. The universities do not teach all things, he wrote, so a doctor must seek out old wives, gypsies, sorcerers, wandering tribes, old robbers, and such outlaws, and take lessons from them. A doctor must be a traveler. Knowledge is experience. This is true. Paracelsus held that crude language of the innkeeper, the barber, the teamster had more real dignity and common sense than the dry scholasticism of Aristotle, Galen of Pergamum, and Avicenna, some of the recognized medical authorities of his day. Paracelsus is said to have graduated from the University of Vienna with a baccalaureate in medicine in 1510. He then went to the University of Ferrara in Italy, where he was free to express his rejection of the prevailing view that the stars and the planets controlled all the parts of the human body. Now, I would like to interject also that, you can't consider yourself an alchemist and denounce astrotheology. It doesn't work that way because of alchemy is the same exact processes as the celestial heavens and what can be found in alchemy of the actual zodiac. So each of the chemical processes for alchemy can be found inside the human body. And so there has to be a correlation between the heavenly constellations and the parts of the body that is associated with those constellations. So for him to denounce that there's a connection to the body parts, I don't think that would be quite right. And if he was actually denouncing that, that would really put him outside the box of alchemy. So I'm a little bit confuddled by that statement that is made on this website. If we look at this chart here, these are all the alchemical processes that are attached to each organ. And so the celestial heavens send their energy down the energy channels throughout the spine that connect to the chakra system. And then the energies flow into the different organs. So for him to denounce it, it's kind of questionable. It is believed that he received a doctoral degree from the University of Ferrara in 1516, and he is presumed to have begun using the name Paracelsus above or beyond Celsus at about this time as well. His new name reflected the fact that he regarded himself as even greater than Aulus Cornelius Celsus, a renowned first-century Roman medical writer. Soon after taking his degree, he set out upon many years of wandering throughout almost every country in Europe, including England, Ireland, and Scotland. He took part in the Netherlandish Wars as an army surgeon. Later, he went to Russia, was held captive by the Tatars, aka Tartarians, escaped into Lithuania, and went south into Hungary. In 1521, he again served as an army surgeon in Italy. His wanderings eventually took him to Egypt, Arabia, the Holy Land, and finally Constantinople. Everywhere he went, he sought out the most learned exponents of practical alchemy, not only to discover the most effective means of medical treatment, but also, and even more important, to discover the latent forces of nature and how to use them. He wrote, "He who is born in imagination discovers the latent forces of nature. Besides the stars that are established, there is yet another imagination that begets a new star and a new heaven." In 1524, Paracelsus returned to his home in Villach to find that his fame for many miraculous cures had preceded him. He was subsequently appointed town physician and lecturer in medicine at the University of Basel in Switzerland, and students from all parts of Europe went to the city to hear his lectures. Pitting a program of his forthcoming lectures to the notice board of the university on June 5, 1527, he invited not only students but anyone and everyone. The authorities were incensed by his open invitation. 10 years earlier, German theologian and religious reformer Martin Luther had circulated his thesis on indulgences. Later, Paracelsus wrote, "Why do you call me a medical Luther? I leave it to Luther to defend what he says, and I will be responsible for what I say. That which you wish to Luther, you wish also to me. You wish us both in the fire." 3 weeks later, on June 24th, 1527, in front of the university, Paracelsus reportedly burned the books of Avicenna, the Muslim prince of physicians, and those of Greek physician Galen. This incident is said to have again recalled in many people's minds Luther, who on December 10th, 1520, at the Elster Gate of Wittenberg, Germany, had burned a papal bull that threatened excommunication. Now, I just wanted to note that PayPal, papal, very, very close. Paracelsus seemingly remained a Catholic to his death. However, it is suspected that his books were placed on the Index Expurgatorius, a catalog of books from which passages of text considered immoral or against the Catholic religion are removed. Similar to Luther, Paracelsus also lectured and wrote in German rather than in Latin. Paracelsus reached the peak of his career in Basel. In his lectures, he stressed the healing power of nature and denounced the use of methods of treating wounds such as padding with moss or dried dung that prevented natural draining. The wounds must drain, he insisted, for if you prevent infection, nature will heal the wound all by herself. He also attacked many other medical malpractices of his time, including the use of worthless pills, salves, infusions, balsams, electuaries, fumigants, and drenches. However, by the spring of 1528, Paracelsus had fallen into disrepute with local doctors, apothecaries, and magistrates. He left Basel, heading first toward Colmar in Upper Alsace, about 50 miles north of the university. He stayed at various places with friends and continued to travel for the next 8 years. During this time, he revised old manuscripts and wrote new treatises. With the publication of Der Großen Wundarzen, the Great Surgery Book, in 1536, he restored and even extended the revered reputation he had earned at Basel. He became wealthy and was sought by royalty. In May 1538, at the zenith of that second period of renown, Paracelsus returned to Villach again to see his father, only to find that his father had died 4 years earlier. In 1541, Paracelsus himself died in mysterious circumstances at the White Horse Inn, Salzburg, where he had taken up an appointment under the Prince Archbishop Duke Ernst of Bavaria. In 1530, Paracelsus wrote a clinical description of syphilis in which he maintained that the disease would be successfully treated by carefully measured doses of mercury compounds taken internally. He stated that the miner's disease, silicosis, resulted from inhaling metal vapors and was not a punishment for sin administered by mountain spirits. He was the first to declare that, if given in small doses, what makes a man ill also cures him, in anticipation of the modern practice of homeopathy. Paracelsus is said to have cured many persons in the plague-stricken town of Sturtzing in the summer of 1534 by administering orally a pill made of bread containing a minute amount of the patient's excreta he had removed on a needle point. Paracelsus was the first to connect goiter with minerals, especially lead in drinking water. He prepared and used new chemical remedies, including those containing mercury, sulfur, iron, and copper sulfate, thus uniting medicine with chemistry, as the first London pharmacopoeia in 1618 indicates. Paracelsus, in fact, contributed substantially to the rise of modern medicine, including psychiatric treatment. Swiss psychologist Carl Jung wrote of him that we see in Paracelsus not only a pioneer in the domains of chemical medicine, but also in those of an empirical psychological healing science. Now, some of these practices, I would say, are a little bit questionable, especially some of the metals employed, because as we know that you can actually be poisoned by the types of metals that go into your body. So perhaps Paracelsus had some good to contribute, but I do question some of the aspects of what he was practicing. And since he was denouncing the Aristotle ways of the body parts being connected to the celestial heavens, I suggest that perhaps Paracelsus wasn't a believer in astrotheology as a resource for attributing signs of illness to the body. I think there's deeper meaning to the zodiac being attached to the body, and I'm not sure what Paracelsus's stance was on that and why he denounced it so highly. The body is physical, but it's also spiritual, so apparently he was pushing away from the spiritual aspects. Although, in what we know from Jacques Vallée's video and just what he had mentioned about Paracelsus contacting these beings via a ritual that he did, Paracelsus had to have known about how the spirit is related to other dimensions and other things. So it's questionable, and is all of this correct and proper, about Paracelsus, or is this skewed somehow? I don't know. I mean, all we know is what we can find about some of these people. So what I figured I would do is go and actually read some of his writings. And this can be found in the Internet Archive, where this has the complete works of Paracelsus. I was going to read this so that way I can enlighten myself on the knowledge that Paracelsus provided, because there's many books here, and see if I can find any evidence of how he contacted the sylphs. I'm not sure what book that might be, but perhaps it's in this information. If this is all of the compiled works of Paracelsus, there may be some occult books that are left out for obvious reasons, because they don't want people to use some of the rituals. Who knows? But what I'll do is I'll leave some of these links in the description box, and you guys can go and begin your research of Paracelsus, because there's profound knowledge tied to this person, as well as people like Aristotle and some of these other alchemists of old. They are also philosophers, so we can learn a great deal from their teachings as well as their practices. So I hope you like this video, and I'll see you guys again on the next one.